Okay, everyone, thanks for your patience and thanks for spending your Wednesday with us. My name is Chris. I'm one of the account executives here at Tailscale and will be moderating today's webinar. I have a few housekeeping items to share before we get started. The first one is you'll notice attendees are muted on entry. But if you do have any questions, we're very eager to hear and address them. So feel free to drop them in the Q&A chat window at any point during the webinar. And we'll try to get through as many as we can. This session is also being recorded and will be made available to watch on demand. And you'll also notice a PDF in the resources section that provides a bunch of quick links that'll take you to all the interesting and informative things that we'll be talking about over the next 30 to 45 minutes. So today's webinar is actually the second in a series of bringing Tailscale to work. We have another webinar that our team will can share the link to for you folks to also review. The reason why we're doing this second webinar about Tailscale Enterprise specifically is because we recently introduced new plans and pricing changes to be more aligned with our customer base and how folks were using Tailscale. Avery, who I'm joined with, wrote a blog post about the decisions behind all the pricing changes and so on and so forth. But the focus today is really to talk about Tailscale Enterprise, the inspiration behind it, and kind of where we're heading towards. So thank you all for joining us. With that, I'll let Avery introduce himself and take it from here.
All right. Well, hello, everybody. I am Avery. I'm the CEO at Tailscale. And as the early arrivers heard, you can follow me on Twitter with at Appenmar. I have done a series of startups in my life, some more successful than others. My first one got acquired by IBM way back when. I worked at Google Fiber for a while. I ended up doing some consulting for senior leadership of Google after that. My first VPN I wrote in 1997. This is actually the fifth time I've started a VPN product. I wrote some of the first few lines of Tailscale with me and my two co-founders. And I really believe this time we got it right. Tailscale is a really exciting product that has finally connected the dots that I've been trying to connect for quite possibly my entire career. So I'm pretty excited about that. And with that in mind, let's jump forward. I know some of the people here have only barely even heard of Tailscale. Other people are already Tailscale users. Some of them are Tailscale customers. So I'm not going to go into a huge amount of detail about exactly what Tailscale is, but I do need to give a little bit of background for people who are not fully aware. So Tailscale is what we call a mesh-capable VPN. You can also call it an overlay network. Some people call it a software-defined network. The word VPN quite often brings up negative feelings in people's minds when they hear it, because especially if they've used it at work, they find that VPNs are terrible and they just wish they could get rid of it and never use a VPN again. If you've used a VPN in your personal life, it is probably for privacy reasons or to steal Netflix. Tailscale is not that kind of consumer VPN. Tailscale is the work VPN, and the kind, people often hate their work VPNs, but Tailscale is the kind of VPN that you don't hate. It just gets out of your way and solves your problem. Part of that is because of the mesh capable part of the description. What that means is instead of funneling all your traffic through a single point that might be far away and then funneling it out to wherever it needs to go, Tailscale can make a direct connection from wherever you are right now to wherever you're trying to go. So it actually doesn't go through Tailscale infrastructure in order to get there. You just install Tailscale on one device, and you install Tailscale on another device or another 10,000 devices, and you can create all of these connections point to point without worrying about firewall rules, DNS, configuration, certificate authorities, machine cert configurations, and so on. Tailscale does all this stuff automatically, tying into your identity provider so that everybody who logs in, for example, with, in our case, a tailscale.com account on Google, will be on the same tailnet and be able to see each other's machines. So this is a really slick and convenient way to set up networking. And if you haven't tried it already, you can try it right during this webinar if you want. And go to the App Store on your favorite device, or go to tailscale.com and click the download button. You can have it actually up and running in about 5 minutes. That's how easy it is. The easiest way to do a test for yourself is just put it on your phone and put it on your laptop. Log in as the same user account in each one, and you will magically have those two things connected. So even if they're not on the same Wi-Fi, if your phone's off on cellular, it can still browse a website or a web server that you're running on your laptop, for example.
I'll take this time to also add a plug for the Tailscale free plan. So as part of the plans and pricing changes that we made, we now allow folks to create a Tailscale account, if you will, and a private Tailscale network for up to 3 users for free and up to 100 devices. So if you happen to have, a very impressive home lab setup with hundreds of servers, don't worry, you're covered there, and you can share it with your friends and family.
Yeah, and that is part of our onboarding for Tailscale. It's one of the most unique things in an infrastructure security product, especially one that's compatible with enterprises, is that it's really, really, really easy to get started, and you can play with it at home. In fact, most active Tailscale users are on the free plan, using it for their own personal, interesting home lab use cases. There's families who host a Minecraft server for their kids and their kids' friends. You can do all kinds of stuff like that. And the reason we can afford to give away the free Tailscale plan is because it creates these point-to-point connections that don't go through our infrastructure and therefore don't cost us money. And so it's pretty unique. It also means it's end-to-end encrypted. There's no way we can see your traffic under any circumstances. Okay, so the main purpose of this webinar is to talk about Tailscale Enterprise, which we launched relatively recently. And I think there's a bit of a perception out there that a VPN or a mesh network that can be usable by consumers is probably not suitable for bigger corporations and enterprise use. And that's definitely not the case. Actually, Tailscale was originally designed for our very first customer back in 2019, which is a bank. And the bank to this day is still very happy with Tailscale, and every single person at that bank is running Tailscale, and that's what they use for their network security and their remote access. That was in 2019. In 2020, of course, COVID hit. They all had to switch to working remotely, and they were pretty excited that they could all just take their laptops home, and nothing really changed. Nothing had to change about their IT infrastructure because they were all already using Tailscale every day, all day, to access their network servers. So Tailscale from day one has been enterprise friendly. After that, we added some of the consumer features just because that was what we ourselves wanted to use at home, and we sort of realized we had something in our hands. But we have over time added a bunch of really neat enterprise features that are not super useful for people at home, but are really critical for people to be able to roll out Tailscale in a scalable way to a large number of people. So that comes down to what we call integration, compliance, support, and access control. These are the things that enterprises need when they're building network infrastructure. It might not matter for you when you're hosting your Minecraft server, other than keeping out the people who are going to come and knock down your sandcastle. But it really matters a lot when you're launching services or running services inside your corporate network. So what that means is it needs to work with the stuff you already have. That's integration. It has to help you with your compliance. For example, SOC 2, PCI compliance, HIPAA compliance, and so on. It has to make sure that you're not going to violate any of those things by sending data around the world or sending it to a hosting provider that is going to be able to read your packets, or by just having security holes that end up leaking stuff all over the internet. We have to have great support, enterprise grade support, which means you have to have very fast turnarounds, you have to have SLAs and so on, you need premium support. And access control, you have to be able to control not just the ability for people to get into your network if they're employees, but also which things they can access once they're in your network. And again, that doesn't matter very much for people with only 3 users, because it's okay to just give everybody access to everything, but it matters a lot in a big corporation where you need to control who has access to which servers. And Tailscale does all of these things, but it's features you may not have seen even if you tried out the free plan. So we want to go through them. While we're here, I want to talk about the difference between connectivity and security. So the way I like to describe this is a VPN is actually a connectivity tool. It's not a security tool. And you might find that surprising, right? VPNs are filled with security keys and encryption and tokens and certificates. But the truth is, the purpose of a VPN is to get more people into your private network, right? The purpose of a security tool is to stop people from doing things. So a VPN is really the opposite of a security tool traditionally. It's a connectivity tool. It gets people connected. That's usually the job of the IT team. You'll often have a security team sitting and sometimes opposed to your IT team, whose job it is to stop people from getting in who should not be getting in. So they'll deploy a firewall. The IT team deploys a VPN whose job is to get through the firewall. And the job of the firewall is to stop people from getting through the firewall. Tailscale is neat. It's one of the first products that I've seen that does both of these jobs. So our goal, and I think we've actually achieved it, believe it or not, is to make both the IT team and the security team equally excited to have Tailscale. And the way that works is Tailscale provides the connectivity layer, but integrated with the connectivity layer is packet filtering and access controls. So you can say exactly which users at which times can access which things. And so you don't have to have this separate concept of like, here's a tool that gets me into my network, and here's a tool that blocks what they can do after they're in the network. By combining those things and having Tailscale tied to your system's identity provider, you can write rules that say like people in the engineering team are allowed to access any device that has been spun up by the engineering team and tagged as development cluster. And the firewall rules can be as simple as that, rather than assigning everybody in the company an IP address, which you would typically do with a VPN, and then you've got a list of these IP addresses, then you have to put those into the firewall, and then different services are broken out into different subnets, and you write a bunch of rules that say these people on these IP addresses are allowed to access these services on these other IP addresses. And every time an IP address changes, you have to go and update the firewall rules and so on. And so it becomes this constant push and pull between IT and security. With Tailscale, you just write the rule once. You say people in the engineering team can access services that are tagged as things that people on the engineering team should be able to access. And you can audit those sets of rules. Auditors who aren't very technical, who are not network engineers, can say, okay, these rules make sense to me. And Tailscale automatically sends packet filtering rules all over the network and reconfigures within 100 milliseconds every time you change one of these rules. So it's really exciting. The net result is that IT teams really love Tailscale because it makes their job so much easier. It gives you connectivity right away. They're used to the security team then saying like, oh, well, the reason that's so easy is it's horribly insecure. You're not allowed to do that. Instead, when they bring in Tailscale, sometimes security teams are a little bit scared at first. It's like, oh God, this is a thing for bypassing my firewall. But when they actually start learning about Tailscale, they realize that it's actually amazingly great for security because it changes the default behavior of IT people or developers from like, I need to spin up a dashboard, for example. Instead of spinning up that dashboard in an EC2 instance and opening up the firewall on that instance to the public world, just so they can access it, while they're testing, and then while they're testing, turns into for the next 5 years. The easiest way to spin up a dashboard becomes don't open the firewall, just put Tailscale on it. And so it's going to be secure by default. And it's really interesting the social effects inside your company of like, when I do something, it's going to be secure by default. And that's the easiest way to do it. That's the best way to roll out security. So security no longer becomes this like, security team says I can't do the fun and easy thing. I have to do it the hard way. It's security team is supporting the easiest way to do it. And so it's pretty easy once you start talking to the security and IT teams to explain to them that these two things fit together. But they're often really surprised because these two teams are so often conflicting with each other.
I think, Avery, that's a good segue into this quote. So for all the details and complexities that you listed out, there's a lot of talk right now about zero trust, and there has been a lot of talk about zero trust. Like, how do you see Tailscale fitting into that paradigm?
Right. Yeah. This is a great quote about zero trust. And you notice I sort of avoided using the term zero trust so far. And actually, we avoid the term zero trust pretty often because it is so poorly defined. Nobody really has achieved it except possibly Google, who created their BeyondCorp system. And I was there at the time. It took them something like 7 years to roll it out, and they had to rewrite a bunch of their internal software from scratch just to make BeyondCorp work. That was, something Google can do, but most of us are not capable of doing that. My definition of zero trust is just that you don't trust the physical network. It's as simple as that, right? We used to be able to say, like, okay, if you can plug in inside my office, that's a pretty good sign that you've got a computer that legitimately should be on my network. And then Wi-Fi got invented, and next thing you know, the Wi-Fi signal is leaking outside the walls, and the ability to get on your network no longer is as meaningful as it used to be. Never mind, having multiple offices connected over VPNs or fibers and so on. Like, it's pretty easy for a committed attacker to be able to get on your physical network. I would say that IT teams, this quote is interesting because it talks about IT teams. I would say every security team wants to implement zero trust. I would say every IT team has to implement a VPN. And even though a lot of users really hate VPNs, virtually every company above a certain size, probably including the one you work at, has a VPN, probably greatly dislikes their VPN, but has a budget for a VPN and knows that everybody is unhappy with their VPN, right? Tailscale is a VPN for the purposes of IT teams who want to swap out their old VPN and replace it with a new one. What's exciting is that when the IT team says, I need to replace my VPN with this thing, and they tell the security team looks at us and then they say, wait a minute, is this a zero trust product? Because it looks like it has all the hallmarks of a zero trust product. And then we can say, yes, it is in fact a zero trust product. You can stop trusting your physical network. That's the entire point of having an overlay network that Tailscale provides. And so that's why the two teams get along so well. But usually we discourage thinking of Tailscale as a zero trust deployment. Think of it as just like, I need to roll out a VPN at my company. And by the way, you're going to get all this zero trust stuff, but maybe do the zero trust stuff after you finish migrating your VPN to the new thing, because you get so much benefit just in deploying Tailscale as a VPN that you don't need to complicate it by adding all these extra requirements on top. You can do that next year. Tailscale does all that stuff, but it doesn't need to be part of your initial deployment. All right, this slide is sort of I think we've probably, or anybody in the security world has heard this term, hard crunchy outside, soft chewy inside. What that means is traditionally you run a VPN, a client connects using a VPN, and you end up inside the network and you can do anything, right? And it's all about firewalls trying to stop things from happening from there. But quite often there's very few firewalls inside the network. And so there's lots of ways, what we call lateral attacks. You can get into one server, you find a security hole in that server has access to another server, then you jump to that server, and so on and so on. Tailscale is the opposite of that. I think we have the next slide that sort of shows Tailscale model. Yeah. Tailscale is the opposite of that because every single connection has its own access controls, and so lateral movement is really hard. You can say this server is simply not allowed to make outgoing connections to any other server in my network. It only accepts incoming connections, right? And it can be as simple as that. Nobody will be willing to talk to this server. So I was talking to one customer a few weeks ago, and they have Jira servers that they found out if they upgrade the Jira servers, it changes the UI, and none of the developers want the new UI. But if they don't upgrade the Jira server, they've got all these security holes and are worried about lateral movement. They said, Avery, can Tailscale help me solve this problem? And I said, well, I guess if you want, what you can do is just set up your Jira servers on Tailscale. So the only way to get to them is via the Tailscale network, and set it up so they're not allowed to make any outgoing connections on Tailscale. So no matter how many bugs there are in your Jira server, they can't hurt anything because the only people who could attack it work for you. So you should probably hire people who are not going to attack it. And the only thing that can happen, even if someone breaks into your Jira server, is that the Jira server is compromised, not the rest of your network, right? So this ability to isolate everything, it's called in the security world microsegmentation. The difference between Tailscale's world of microsegmentation and the original world of microsegmentation is you only microsegment the new virtual network. You don't have to do microsegmentation on the physical network, which is risky and usually requires a flag day where 10,000 servers get flipped over from regular networking to microsegmentation. And that's an extremely risky flag day. With Tailscale, instead, you incrementally move things onto the Tailscale network, you play with it, you make sure it works, and then you take them off the physical network. So it's sort of like a greenfield virtual world that you're getting into without having to change your physical world.
Perfect. So Avery, I think we've done a really good job of walking through the different considerations, discussing the VPN, how Tailscale, is an upgrade from the traditional VPN. Now I think it's a good time for us to shift focus into Tailscale and what makes it, enterprise grade, enterprise ready, along with some of the features and functionalities that we've packaged up together. I think one of the first features that I requested we talk about that isn't necessarily a feature that's limited to enterprise, but I think is critical to ensuring, preventing the lateral attacks and securing your network is access control list, which in my personal opinion and talking to customers is where a lot of the magic happens. So let's start here, if you don't mind, Avery, and then we'll walk through some of the other Tailscale Enterprise features that we've been working on.
Yeah. So yeah, all the stuff I mentioned so far, like that applies even if you download the free version of Tailscale and start playing with it. Access controls are available in every plan level. You can even play with them on the free plan if you want. They get more advanced as you move up the scale and all the way into enterprise. But the general idea is the same. There's a configuration file. And people are sometimes surprised to find that it's a file. You show up in the Tailscale web admin console and we've got a bunch of buttons for everything, but then you go to the ACL tab and you get a JSON file. And for the nerds among us, it is actually not exactly a JSON file. It's a JSON file with extra commas and comments, which are the two things that were wrong with original JSON. So we actually released this library called HUJSON, human usable JSON, that make it so it's a little bit more manageable, because we felt like a configuration file with no comments is a pretty bad configuration file. Anyway, the reason it's a text file is because you want to be able to change it with APIs. You want to be able to do GitOps deployments, so people can have code reviews. It's machine editable, so we have a UI that can poke things into this configuration file. We can automatically update it as new features are added and so on. But it's still relatively user-friendly. And I think especially for teams rolling out an enterprise, I'm sure you've run into this. There's a nice friendly user interface for setting configuration options in AWS. But if you actually use that friendly configuration interface, you're going to very rapidly lose control of what's going on in your AWS network, right? If you instead use APIs in Terraform or Pulumi or so on to roll this stuff out automatically, you can keep it all under control. So Tailscale has this thing in the background, which is a declarative configuration of what all of the access controls across your entire network can do. How you want to set that is up to you. You can do it in the web admin console, but usually companies above a certain size with an IT team and a security team are going to want to automate that stuff using GitOps and so on. So I really love the access control list. This is one of the most powerful features of Tailscale. When we do a demo, just commenting out a line and watching a session connecting between two random devices on your peer-to-peer network immediately get broken because you've removed the permission for that connection is really exciting, because these changes, you hit the save button or you call the API and it immediately reflects across tens of thousands of nodes on your Tailscale network. There's no delay, there's no reconfiguring firewalls, there's no filing tickets. And if you make a mistake, you just change it back. Right? There's also the feature, one of the things I like a lot about the ACL file is there's unit tests. So you can actually write little tests to make sure that when you change a security rule, it's actually going to reject that change unless certain assertions remain true. Like, this person always needs to have access to this server. If I accidentally delete the rule that would do that, it's going to reject it. Or this person should never have access to the server. So if I accidentally make a rule that would give somebody access to that server, the rule must be wrong, so it's going to reject it. So we really thought through how to make it enterprise friendly and enterprise friendly access control for your entire network. And this can scale, like I said, to tens or hundreds of thousands of nodes. All right, next big thing that you probably have not run into until you've tried to roll out Tailscale to an entire organization. There is a feature called SCIM. I actually don't remember what the acronym stands for, but it's a user and group synchronization system that's built into many identity providers. Okta is the first one supported by Tailscale. If you're using Azure AD, there's an alpha test that is currently happening. You can get on the waiting list and just contact our sales team because we can also synchronize users and groups with Tailscale. What this does is it makes it so that in your ACLs, you can refer to groups in your identity system and grant permissions to those people based on the identity. So you can have a really nice flow where somebody joins your company, the HR team creates their account, puts them in the engineering team, and then they automatically get access to things that the engineering team should have access to. You don't have to do anything because those groups are automatically synced into Tailscale. Tailscale automatically compiles the ACLs down, including these group definitions, into packet filters. It sends the packet filters to all the devices on the network and then all the connections are enabled or disabled automatically. And of course, the opposite is also true. Like, okay, this person's no longer in the engineering team, or this person no longer works for us. It immediately synchronizes that information to Tailscale, and that person's access to the network is immediately disconnected. And with Okta, this happens within single-digit seconds of pushing the button in the Okta console. So it's really exciting. I find it very exciting.
Avery, the huge JSON enthusiasts have informed me that SCIM stands for System for Cross-Domain Identity Management.
Oh, well, there you go.
There you go.
That is a great acronym that tells me nothing, as many acronyms do. I would say OIDC also stands for System for Cross-Domain Identity Management, and yet it's a completely different protocol that does a different thing. But anyway, yeah, it is a group synchronization mechanism. I'm very sad to report that Google does not support SCIM. They have their own funny thing, but it's pretty common among all of the other identity providers to support this. And it's pretty easy to configure SCIM in Tailscale nowadays. It really sort of it up levels your ability to write access control rules without you don't even need to talk about usernames anymore. You can just talk about groups and have this stuff all automatically managed. All right, there's another feature that is available in Tailscale. So we didn't talk about the Tailscale architecture very much. There's an article called How Tailscale Works. If you just Google for that, you will find it on our website. I actually wrote it way back when in 2020, I think. The way Tailscale works in a super high level is there is a so-called control plane and a data plane. The control plane is what distributes public keys to handle the end-to-end encryption, and it's centralized. We run a SaaS service in the cloud that you send your public keys to. It handles the authentication integration with your ID provider, and then it sends the public keys back. Some people worry that because we control this control plane, we could do nasty things to your network, such as inserting public keys that we shouldn't be inserting, right? That's the danger of not having complete control over your own VPN. If you deploy an on-premises, traditional style physical VPN, it has many disadvantages because you have to maintain a whole bunch of stuff. But one advantage is nobody else can jump in and start reconfiguring your control plane, right? Tailscale, we want to get the best of both worlds. So there's a feature called Tailnet Lock. You don't have to use it, but many enterprises are interested in this, in which even though we run the control plane in the cloud, your devices will not accept anything from our control plane unless those instructions are signed by a device that you control, right? So it's a little bit hard to explain, but the neat thing about it is you don't have to do the one risky part of running the VPN, which is hosting a control plane, which has like security equivalents to running a root CA. And it's very hard to secure a root CA. Most companies don't even want to go down that path, right? If you wanted to host your own on-premises Tailscale, you would have to run your own effectively root CA, which is really hard. To avoid that, you can use the Tailscale control server in the cloud, but then use Tailnet Lock. So instructions have to come down through Tailscale, but you don't have to accept them. So you get the best of both worlds. You have total control that we can't do anything wrong, but you don't have to actually run all that stuff yourself. So if someone wants to break in, they have to break into Tailscale and they have to break into your signing system, rather than having to break into one or the other. So it's really powerful. Some of the most secure, security conscious organizations are pretty excited about this because, normally for something as security critical as a network infrastructure, they would insist on rolling out Tailscale on premises. This makes it so you don't have to. And that just eliminates an entire area of pain and suffering. All right, log streaming is another one. This is our relatively recent launch from Tailscale, but it's pretty exciting. So traditional VPNs funnel all the traffic through a single point. We sometimes call that a single point of failure, but in the case of logging, it's actually a single point of auditing and control. And people don't like single points of failure, but they really like single points of auditing and control because you can insert a logging system, you can put in a security monitoring system and IDS and so on in this one point and see all the traffic coming into your network and do stuff with it. Tailscale, because it generates a mesh network of a whole bunch of point-to-point connections, it eliminates single points of failure, which is amazing. It scales because the capacity of the network grows with number of nodes because there is no single point where you're funneling all the traffic. It's still secure because you have end-to-end encryption, but it has this really annoying limitation, which is that you don't get the ability to log the traffic at a single point. So all of the tools that you're used to using for that no longer work. So with Tailscale log streaming, we built something so that every node in the network streams its logs of its traffic metadata wherever you want it to go. are the initial partners for this feature are Splunk and Elasticsearch, but you can connect it to more or less everything. And then you can tie that SCIM system into whatever kind of IDS and so on you want. The traffic logs that we produce are compatible with the traffic logs you might get from a physical set of routers, right? And in order to control or handle the concept or the problem of tampering with individual nodes, because it's obviously a little bit easier for someone to tamper with the laptop that's in their hands than it is for them to tamper with a single router that you have deployed somewhere else. Tailscale logs both ends of connection. It's very hard for someone to tamper with both ends of a connection simultaneously. A difference between the two endpoints is an indication that tampering might be taking place. So you can detect that also. In addition to network flow logs, I see it's spelled flog logs. That's pretty good. We should call it that. In addition to network flow logs, we have configuration audit logs. So every change made to the ACLs, every node that gets added to your network, every key that gets refreshed, every person that gets logged in, all gets logged into one of these into this logging system, and you can send that to your CM as well.
I will take this opportunity to also plug that we are constantly adding new integrations as well. So our product team is in talks with multiple other SIM providers to add support. So if there's anything that you would like to see us support as a destination for these logs, please reach out and let us know. We're happy to add more integrations.
Yeah. All right, another new feature. Many people who have tried Tailscale are already familiar with Tailscale SSH, but if you haven't heard of it, one of the things it does, it takes your network layer identity, which is already attached to the IP address that Tailscale assigns you when you log in using your identity provider, and it carries that same identity over to SSH. So you turn on Tailscale SSH on a server, and then you SSH to that server over Tailscale. You no longer need to configure SSH keys because you show up and it already knows who you are. And it'll let you in based on a configuration you put in the ACL policy file we talked about earlier. So you can just write all of your ACL or your SSH configurations in there as well and say okay, people on this part of the engineering team are allowed to SSH into this subset of servers and have this and use this sort of identity and get this sort of access. And if you change your mind, you change it in one place in the policy file, and they're immediately disconnected from all those different SSH servers. So you don't have to ever manage SSH keys again. It's amazingly powerful and surprisingly simple. And it's also useful in the free plan if you just don't want to manage your own public keys and just have a bunch of Raspberry Pis around. You'll be able to SSH into those Raspberry Pis without configuring anything. But for enterprise, one of the downsides of being able to directly SSH into things is that you don't go through jump boxes anymore. Jump boxes mostly exist. I mean, they exist for two reasons. One is that connectivity is too hard. And so sometimes you'll have a public facing jump box that you have to SSH into first from the outside world. And then from there, you SSH into the next thing. People hate jump boxes because it's an extra step. It slows things down. It causes all these kind of weird problems. It only works with SSH. It doesn't work with IP protocol and so on. But you have this really nice, again, single point of failure, but single point of control, right? You can drop someone's SSH key from the jump box and you know that they're disconnected from the entire network. Also, you can log SSH sessions that go through the jump box. Everybody who SSHs on the jump box, you can stream everything they do to somewhere else. So when we eliminate the single point of failure / single point of control, you get the really nice convenient feature of just being able to reach every device directly, but you lose this ability to log all the traffic. SSH session recording in Tailscale solves this problem because it puts a session recording layer into every single SSH server running on your entire network. And it can stream those SSH session logs wherever you want to stream them. And again, I really like, our development team always goes the extra mile on this sort of thing. Instead of those SSH logs going to us, because they often contain really, really important critical private stuff like AWS keys that somebody copies into a file or people's usernames and passwords. So it would be really bad if you stream those things to the wrong place. We don't want to have access to that at all. Instead, you can launch your own recorder node on your Tailscale network. So anywhere you want, you can run it on premises, you could run it in AWS, you could run it in some other cloud. It'll be connected over Tailscale, of course, because that's what we do, right? Then all of the SSH log streams get sent to this recorder node or set of recorder nodes that you completely control over the end-to-end encrypted Tailscale network, so we never see the unencrypted content, and you can do whatever you want with them from there. Some people send them to S3 buckets, some people keep them on local disk, some people send them to their CM system, whatever you're comfortable with. You can encrypt them before sending them somewhere. We never see the SSH session logs. We have no ability to access them, but we facilitate generating these session logs without having to have a single point of failure, which minimizes latency and so on. It's hard to express how neat that feature is, because I think I've never seen anything like it before. Usually you have to choose either centralization or control or slowdowns and jump boxes and so on. And Tailscale just gives you the best of all the worlds. Here's a slide about pricing. You want to talk about pricing, Chris?
Yeah, happy to. So with the announcement of Tailscale Enterprise, I think we also coupled it with an announcement of doing consumption-based billing. And so in gory detail, Avery goes over in a blog post about the utilization rates of the average Tailscale customer. And really the situation that we were trying to mitigate against is folks overpaying for what they're using and truly getting the value out of Tailscale and really only paying for the value that they get out of Tailscale. So with enterprise planning and billing, we now have flexible credit-based model and annual or monthly based billing programs. So long story short, plenty of different programs to help customers, make things fit into their budgets. A lot of flexibility there. Additionally, on the support side, we've now published public SLAs for our support. So you can actually go to our docs and actually find the SLAs. And then some of our enterprise customers have told us, hey, we need 24/7 support with certain response times. That's now something that our support team has been working diligently on to be able to support mission critical tier 1, tier 0 type requirements.
Yeah, so I just want to talk a little bit about that usage-based billing, because I think that's really interesting. A couple of years ago, we had a customer who signed on for 1,000 seats of Tailscale. It was like, oh, all right, we really love this thing. We're going to buy 1,000 seats. We're going to roll it out to 1,000 people. Don't worry. And we sort of watched their usage over the course of the following year. And they went to 5 people, and then 10 people, and then 20 people. And they kind of it started ramping up. By the end of the year, they made it all the way to 100 people, but they had paid for 1,000 for the year. And that's a really awkward conversation to have at the end of the year when you're having your renewal discussion, because you've paid for 1,000 seats and you're only rolled at 100. And I think a lot of people, if you're in the security world and you're listening to this, you're very familiar with this experience where you've bought something, you really planned to roll it out, but other stuff got more important. It jumped in your way. And now you're feeling kind of embarrassed because you bought 1,000 seats and you only rolled at 100. We really don't want people to have that experience. It's our belief that if we align our incentives with your incentives, we're all going to be more successful. And so the way Tailscale works is we bill you for the seats you're actually using. And actually using means data is being transferred between one user and the rest of the network, right? So if you're not sending the bytes, you don't count as an active user. And so on our monthly plans, which is the default you get when you self-serve in, we just automatically bill you each month for the number of users that you have active. And you can set a limit so you don't accidentally get overbilled, but you're going to get billed that much or less. If you have an annual plan or prepaid plan, you can buy credits up front, and we'll automatically deduct credits based on how much usage you actually have. So you never have this sort of embarrassing experience where it wasn't the right time to roll out all 1,000 seats. And so you ended up overpaying. You only pay for what you use. And I think we all benefit from that.
Yeah, perfect. Thanks, Avery. So with that, I think we can skip ahead or go next to the Q&A section. As mentioned previously, for the folks in attendance right now, feel free to submit your questions via the Q&A tab, and then we'll get to as many questions as we can. We did have questions submitted in advance, so I'll go ahead and ask Avery a few of these. So Avery, the first question is around being able to configure the IP range that Tailscale uses. Any plans on that, or what is our thinking?
Right. So I think if I understand this question correctly, it is it's asking about what people often do when they're rolling out a VPN, which they will assign, say, the engineering team to one IP subnet and, say, the marketing team to another IP subnet. And then they will set up their firewalls to say, okay, people, like, IP is coming from this subnet, they must be engineers, so therefore they're allowed to access these servers on the engineering subnet or something like that. Tailscale can let you do that. There are ways to make that happen. We generally recommend against it because the ACL system in Tailscale is much more powerful. And the problem is with these subnets is that you can only be on a single subnet at a time. So you have to choose, is this person on the, say, Miami engineering team, or are they on the Montreal engineering team, or are they on the marketing team? And then you have to say, okay, well, people on the Miami engineering team are allowed to access this, but people on the marketing team are not allowed to access this. And so when somebody is in a role that sort of crosses between two things, let's say they're in engineering and in marketing, then it's impossible to actually find a subnet to put them on that allows you to represent the rules that you want. So we really recommend against using the IP range thing because it works a lot better with things like Tailscale roles. You can have multiple roles going on at the same time in your identity system. You can have them in the engineering group and the marketing group if you want, and then they have access to both the engineering things and the marketing things. But I encourage you to talk to our solutions architects if you have this problem. We have lots of different ways that can help you fill in these situations, because we understand that in many cases, people are trying to adopt Tailscale incrementally. That means they already have all these firewalls and subnets configured, and they want to do things a particular way, and we can help you set that up.
So perhaps a related follow-up question that we just got, it's related to the CGNAT range that we use. So this question is, across tailnets, will Tailscale IPs always be unique?
That is a great question. It's also a pretty deep question. Because I didn't talk about IP addresses almost at all in this presentation. Okay, so Tailscale hands out IP addresses for every device you add to your tailnet. Tailnet, by the way, is the name for your private Tailscale network. It will hand out something in the 100.64/10 IPv4 range, which has about 4 million addresses. That is not enough addresses for all the Tailscale users in the world. So eventually it will run out, of course. The way we handle that is we reuse IP addresses between tailnets. Because virtually no organization is going to have more than 4 million devices. And I'll get to that in a moment because some organizations do have more than 4 million devices, but virtually no organization will. Then if you want to share nodes between organizations, what we do is we make sure to give you a number that is not shared between those two organizations. And the math of this gets a little bit complicated because organization A might share with organization B might share with organization C, and next thing you know, everybody's in one giant network of shared organizations. So it's pretty hard to find these IP addresses, but rest assured that our team has figured this out. And so it's okay that we reuse addresses between organizations. One thing that you can do to sort of just dodge around all this other stuff, because we've run into some people that, for example, have deployed like Kubernetes clusters that are reusing the same 100.64/10 sub IP range. It's not that common, but it definitely happens. One thing you can do is just turn off IPv4 addressing in Tailscale. We have an IPv6 only mode. And that sounds scary because anybody who's tried to roll out IPv6 is probably aware that the problem with it is not everything is running on IPv6, and so your IPv6 packets will be dropped probably between point A and point B. The nice thing is Tailscale will make sure those packets get delivered because it can carry IPv6 over IPv4 networks. So even if you've got an isolated IPv6 network in one data center, another isolated IPv6 network in another data center, and there's no IPv6 connectivity between them, Tailscale will make that connectivity work, and those two IPv6 addresses will be able to talk to each other. And there's essentially unlimited IPv6 addresses in the world, so we don't have to worry about that kind of conflict at all. And we have this additional feature called 4 via 6, and you can Google for that, Tailscale 4 via 6, that allows you to map an IPv4 subnet on your network into an IPv6 subnet on the Tailscale network. So then, even if you've got 10 different data centers, all using, say, 192.168.1.0/24, right? Each of those different 192.168.1.0 networks can be mapped into a different IPv6 subnet. And so you can access all of them from a single point without worrying about running out of addresses. So we've got a bunch of stuff that will help you with this problem. IPv4 is always going to be a tight address space, but if you allow Tailscale to use the IPv6 features, you can solve a lot of these problems for yourself.
Perfect. Next question. Softball, I think. Does Tailscale include automated deployment and provisioning for infrastructure and assets?
That is actually again an interesting question because Tailscale is not a provisioning company. Tailscale works with your existing MDM and provisioning software. It's really easy to roll out. It sits in the App Store. It sits as a single package. On Windows, we've got MSI installers. On Linux, we've got every kind of packaging system under the sun. On macOS, there's 3 different ways to roll out Tailscale, depending how you want to do it. So we don't try to do the automated deployment. We just make it easy for you to plug the deployment into your automated deployment system. That said, even companies that don't have an MDM, maybe they're too small, maybe they don't want to, maybe they don't support it on particular architecture, it's very easy to install Tailscale because it's all packaged up. So if you're on macOS or iOS or Android, you can just download it from the App Store, and that's it. And it's safe to let people download it from the App Store because the only way they can get on your network is by then logging into Tailscale. That sends it to the SSO identity provider for your domain. And the only way they can get on your network is to log in with your domain and access your stuff. So it's super easy. Many companies that roll out Tailscale don't even need to push it. They just give their employees a simple set of instructions. Follow this link. That sends you to the macOS App Store. Install the app, push the login button, you're done. So you have like basically the whole range of possibilities. But Tailscale is not a thing that rolls out other people's software or anything like that.
Yeah, I'll also mention, I think Avery discussed the automation pieces on the client side really well. On the server side, what I often hear from customers is, do you support something like a Terraform, Pulumi? Do you have APIs to automate the enrollment of servers onto the Tailscale network? The answer to all of that is yes. We do support Terraform, Pulumi. We have APIs for both ACLs, adding devices, so on and so forth. So
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I forgot about those. Those are very slick. You can generate authorization keys, and those authorization keys can turn into other authorization keys and so on. We also have a Kubernetes operator if you want to roll out Tailscale in a Kubernetes cluster.
Yep. Okay, so next question is a pretty interesting one. Do you see a future where Tails applications and solutions will communicate solely via zero trust? And what I've interpreted this question to mean is, if you look at other zero trust solutions out there on the market where, you're effectively proxying all your traffic through them, is that, an architecture that Tailscale might want to adopt at some point?
That is a great question. I think it's a pretty subtle question. The way I like to look at this stuff, first of all, a world where all the traffic in the world is being proxied through a small number of single points of failure operated by a zero trust provider is probably not going to happen. There are, I think last time I checked, something like 10 billion devices connected to the internet. That is way too many devices to run through a so-called zero trust or beyond core proxy network without a huge expense and some a lot of added latency. But zero trust, although it's often associated with networks of proxies and having to push everything through a single point of failure, zero trust doesn't require that. Zero trust just requires that each endpoint have a trust relationship established through a set of encryption keys, right? Tailscale helps you establish those endpoints, but it itself, we don't route your traffic for you. The two devices just find a way to connect to each other point to point. And so that is infinitely scalable. You can imagine a world where everybody is using something like Tailscale. Everybody has a provision key. Everybody can find out the public key of the thing they want to talk to and then talk to it with end-to-end encryption. That's the world we should be headed for. But also, I don't believe in any sort of plan that calls for 100% rollout of anything because it takes a really long time to roll out something 100%. That's one of the problems with the IPv6 rollout. People don't benefit from IPv6 until everybody's on IPv6 and we can finally turn off IPv4. Well, that's just, indications are 25 or 30 years after they started, that doesn't seem to be happening. Right now, all we have is IPv4 and IPv6, which is twice as much work to maintain. None of us want that, right? So Tailscale adds zero trust on top of the physical network you already have. And so you can provision Tailscale on the most security sensitive things you have first. And then over time, migrate incrementally, and you're getting value out of this zero trust one device at a time, or one user at a time, or 100 users at a time if you decide to, or 1,000 users at a time. But you don't ever have to hit 100%, and you'll get value for every single incremental change you make. And you can target 100%. I would love to live in a world where everything is 100% zero trust, but it will take a long time. The difference between a Tailscale rollout and an IPv6 rollout is you'll see the benefits after the first 1 or 2 or 10 devices, right? Not only when you hit 100%.
Perfect. And then the next question is a pretty interesting one. How does your product address physical versus logical network segmentation? It's almost
Right.
like they've been listening to some of our conversations with customers. I like.
Almost like that. Yeah. So this is why we call Tailscale an overlay network, right? It is important to understand. Like we talked about these 100.64 IP addresses that we give out, or the fact that you can have Tailscale IPv6 addresses that don't require IPv6 connectivity on the physical network. So Tailscale is effectively a virtual network that doesn't care about the layout of the physical network. So we can microsegment the virtual network and have complete control over that. We can log all the traffic going over the virtual network without Tailscale, the company, ever seeing what that traffic is because it's being streamed to you, right? We can make end-to-end encryption. We can control who has access. We can make sure every IP address on your virtual network is associated with a human identity that then you can cut off or change its access rights. Without caring what's going on the physical layer. You don't have to change anything about the physical layer to use Tailscale. Once you've got a widespread rollout of Tailscale, you can start to remove so-called intelligence from the physical layer, right? You don't need fancy firewalls because there's no unencrypted traffic going over these physical networks. Even if someone could just break in and plug into your physical network, it wouldn't matter. Other than like wasting your bandwidth because they couldn't do anything once being connected, right? That's the nice, the long-term benefit you want by migrating more things onto this virtual network. But you don't really have to do physical network segmentation anymore when you're using Tailscale. The interesting segmentation happens completely at the virtual layer, and you don't have to be like plugging and unplugging virtual wires. You just sort of, you go into the policy file, you say what you want done, and Tailscale makes that happen.
Okay, Avery, I think we have time for two more questions. And I will preface both of these with let's not get ourselves in trouble with our product team. So the first,
I always get myself in trouble with our product team.
Yeah, it will be you that they come after, not me. So first question is, what options are there for device compliance checks?
Ooh, device compliance checks. So we are working on this feature. I'm not afraid to say it. I'll take any flack from our product team. It is very nearly ready to go into alpha and beta testing. We're working on a feature called device posture. The way that's going to work is devices in your Tailscale network will have so-called attributes, key value pairs associated with them. And those key value pairs will be things like, has disk encryption turned on? Is the operating system fully patched? Which operating system even is it? Is this a corporate issued device or is it a personal device? All those things. We populate those attributes, and then in the policy file, you can say, okay, here's a collection of attributes that says this is a high security device. Here's a collection of attributes that says this is a low security device. And so I'm Avery, I'm the CEO. Maybe I should have access. I think I've been cut off, but I think maybe I should have access to our production network so I can do things to our production services. I don't get to do engineering anymore since I spend all my time doing webinars and stuff. But hypothetically, so if I have a corp issued highly secure device like a Chromebook that is really, really, really hard to get a virus onto, then maybe I can have access to the most sensitive security stuff. But if I want to access our network from my phone and just look at some dashboards, I'm still Avery, but that device should have a different set of permissions than my super highly secure Chromebook, right? Tailscale device posture is going to let you do that. And the slight catch to all that is, how do those device attributes get populated? That has to be done through some sort of software integration that actually knows about the status of each of your devices. And so we're going to be working with a set of partners that are going, and I won't mention specific names right now, but you'll recognize them when they come out, that can populate these attributes for every device that goes on your network automatically. And then you can just write Tailscale rules that talk about these attributes.
Perfect. Thanks, Avery. And then last one. What use cases or how does Tailscale work with SaaS applications? So giving your employees access to SaaS applications via Tailscale.
Right. This is an interesting question just because it's not sort of in the core functionality of what Tailscale is supposed to do. But we frequently find that customers have very related problem that they need to solve at the same time, which is typically with their existing VPN, they funnel all of their traffic through a single point of failure / single point of control. And that single point of control has an IP address on the internet. And then they add that IP address to the IP allow list for various SaaS products. So that basically you have to be on the corporate VPN before you can log into, I don't know, Zendesk or something. Because all of the traffic from your corporation to Zendesk is supposed to come through this single point of, I'll call it single point of control, but it's also a single point of failure, right? It also makes everything slow because all your traffic has to go through this single point. But it's a really nice added security layer. IP-based security is kind of embarrassing. It's not end-to-end encrypted. It's pretty easy for a man in the middle to attack it, but it's a lot better than no security. So a lot of people are doing it. Tailscale allows you to do this. You can intercept IP addresses. You can funnel everything through an exit node, for example. We have lots of customers doing that. Basically, we make Tailscale act like one of these traditional VPNs with a single point of control. You can also capture individual IP addresses that belong to your service providers and route traffic to just those IP addresses. That's quite easy to do, and you can have different exit locations that the traffic comes from. You can also, there is a new feature called DNS search domains, which we just launched, where you can actually add particular domains. So like, again, hypothetically using one called Zendesk, which is a popular support ticketing company, you can capture the DNS for zendesk.com, bounce that to a particular device that's on your tailnet, and have that device proxy traffic out to Zendesk. It requires like a little bit of manual assembly right now to make all that stuff work. Most people don't want to do that manual assembly and they just use exit nodes instead. But I think in the not so distant future, we're going to make that a little bit more slick and easy to use. But if you have questions about how to solve this problem, do contact our like solutions architects because they can help you set something up.
Awesome. Good stuff, Avery, and right on time. So on behalf of the Tailscale team, just wanted to thank all the attendees for spending your Wednesday with us. We hope to, again, make these webinars a more regular occurrence, get you folks more time with Avery and or the rest of the Tailscale team. So thank you again for spending your Wednesday with us, and we hope to see you all soon. Thanks, Avery, as well.
Thanks, everybody.